Okay, so now it's time to talk about Five Nights at Freddy's. It's a horror movie that, quite frankly, way overperformed any expectations that I think most people had, before it came out. Now, I will say it was tracking pretty high for a horror film, especially. I mean, I guess it makes sense. It's Halloween weekend, so any horror movie this week would have had a decent amount of, uh, people trying to go watch it. um, but for Blumhouse, it was like a record opening. I mean, I think it was like a record opening for Halloween weekend, and it was a
16 different countries. It was the biggest Bloomhouse opening.
how many?
16 different countries.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
That's amazing because it pulled in 78 million domestically, and I think it was like 131 global. It was the biggest horror movie opening of the year, which there is no way that you would have thought Five Nights at Freddy's was going to do that at this, when you looked at the slate
Also,
of movies.
also not for a movie that opened in theaters and in Peacock at the same time. You watched this movie at home, and people still chose to go spend their movie and see it in theaters.
In a theater, which I think, like you were talking about this before we started the show, that it may have been a reflection of the fact that there really aren't a lot of movies out there. Like maybe if there was more competition, it wouldn't have
Yeah.
done as well. But it's just a matter of people are going to the movie theater. It's Halloween weekend, and so this happens to be the new movie on the block, and they were like, well, there's a horror movie. It's Halloween weekend. What better time for us to go dress up and go watch a horror movie at the theater?
Well,
So
also you have to think about the fact that the rest of the horror movies that have been released this year. The Exorcist, the newest Exorcist was so many people were so excited to see this movie, and it let so many people down. You had The Nun 2, which did terribly. I literally didn't even want to watch it at home. We were like scrolling through options, and we were like, "Oh, cool! What's this? Oh, terrible reviews. I'm kidding. We're not watching that." Five Nights at Freddy's, I do think, after seeing the movie, did as well as it did in theaters because of the lack of options on the Halloween theme. However, you did point out that this movie is based off of a video game that you and I did not play, apparently.
it's no, we didn't play. I mean, I know I didn't play it. I know you said that you didn't play it, but it's a video game franchise that's been around for almost a decade, and so I think there was a built-in audience to this as a franchise, and maybe, and some I was kind of theorizing that maybe people were underestimating just how passionate that fan base was, but I think the more likely reason is the fact that there wasn't a lot of competition.
Yeah.
What the one thing that this does bring up though, in the past we have seen that movies that get day and date releases, usually we point to the fact that the quality of the film is terrible, therefore the studio doesn't have any faith in it, which is why they're doing that day and date release strategy. And that was certainly true for like the last Halloween movie, which they did the same thing at Universal. It was Peacock had it the same day that movie theaters did. But in this case, like, okay, the Rotten Tomatoes score for the critics is not very good. It's not very high. It's one of those things where the critic score combined with the audience score adds up to 100 or just about. Like the audience score is much, much higher, which is never like a good sign. But and if you're and again, look, if this audience score is that high, then clearly a lot of people liked it. Like I'll even say this: The Exorcist and The Nun 2. We had comments in our videos, like, and even there was one person who commented on our preview video of Five Nights at Freddy's who said that they loved the movie and they kind of like gave us a few points of reason why they did. So with horror movies, they do tend to, in terms of box office analysis, they tend to be review like critic proof in some ways because people tend to go watch horror movies regardless of whether they're like masterful cinema like Martin Scorsese would say, or if they're just absolute trash. Like it doesn't, like, even had the Halloween movies like did relatively well considering they were day and date
Actually,
releases.
so
But
true. I know so many people that will just go see an awful movie even after people have said it's really bad just to laugh at it.
yeah,
Which I
it's
guess I don't get, but like,
and part of like part of it is the fact that horror movies are almost like these roller coaster rides. Like you go to an amusement park, right? And some people are like, I may throw up by riding this roller coaster, but I'm going to do it anyway because it's going to be so much fun. And and it's sort of like that is how I liken, the urge to go watch some horror movies. People just, they're not there to watch something that's going to be like an Oscar caliber movie. They just want to watch a horror movie and get their frights.
well,
So,
to that point, I think so many of the cult favorite horror films are really bad. just really, really bad. Like the original Halloween movie. I'm sure in the 70s it scared the crap out of people, but I literally watched that movie like BFFR. Be for real, please, someone. But people love that
it,
movie.
it requires a certain level of suspension of disbelief, and to me, like that's the reason why, like I like as a fan of movies, the horror genre, like I have a very high bar for movies in general, and I
Yeah.
don't usually like a lot of people make the exception for horror because they're like, you're not going to watch. Like I make that exception for certain franchises. I don't make it for genres. Like if I'm going to watch a Transformers movie, I know I'm gonna get maybe some hot garbage, some cheesy one-liners,
Okay, I did
but
finally watch Bumblebee and I loved it. Okay, I think I
Bumblebee was
mentioned
a
it again. I was just like, that was a good movie.
Bumblebee was like the highest rated Transformers movie ever made. So that's like, oh, maybe the second highest. If I don't know
The
what the first one
only
score is.
the only horror movie that I really look back on and I'm like, that was a good movie. It scared the shit. Insidious and Conjuring, the OGs. Even
Every
watching
once in a while,
Exorcist movies. I mean, I had nightmares. Like it was
yeah.
too good. The original Saw movies, freaky.
Well, I think that franchise after the first one like sort of went downhill,
Oh,
but
I did watch the newest one and it had good reviews and it was also hot
yeah.
garbage.
I mean,
So
for me, like Shutter Island, like gave me nightmares after watching that for a little bit.
Shutter Island.
That it's Leonardo DiCaprio, Martin Scorsese directed it. I think it also has Mark Ruffalo in it. You should check out Shutter Island. I think it's on one of
I
like
feel like
those.
I have, but I can't remember it. So maybe I need to just go back and watch it.
Go check. It's like a psychological horror. It's that one like has
And
still
Midsummer.
resonates.
Midsummer had me like,
Oh yeah, like
oh,
it's like the psychological horror
oh,
ones. Like the ones because they leave you thinking and like for okay, this is crazy
yeah.
because I don't think Final Destination is one of those movies, but I think like the second one maybe or the fourth one, the one where like you're driving on the highway and like the truck jackknives and all these logs like start rolling and
The
killing
second
people.
one,
The second one
unreal. I
of
still
all
to
the
this day, when I
yeah
see trucks, it
hmm
influences my behavior, that movie,
yeah yeah
because of
yep
that. Another
yeah
reason your girl never tried a tanning bed, those girls got roasted alive in there. I will never. I'm sorry.
right. It just
So
and
the
that's what
fact that this movie legit influenced my behavior, it influences
mhm.
my driving behavior. I will never drive behind any car with anything along those lines, logs, like cylinders,
Yeah.
pipes, holes, because if Final Destination is tried and true, I don't want to be the one who
Right.
figures it out.
Even if it's a 1 in a million chance, like you're just like, watch me be the one who gets crushed by like this prop. Like I usually just
Watch
like
me be
pass.
the
I'm
one
like
that gets
driving right by.
electrocuted by the power cord that breaks
Yeah.
and lands in the puddle at my feet. Like,
Mm-mm, mm-mm.
I'm
Yeah.
okay. I'm okay.
Right. It's yeah. It's one of those like that when I was growing up, like watch that movie, I was like, oh my god, like, and then I would like do these scenario like things in my head. Okay, well, if I do that, if I do this, then this could happen and that could happen. To the point I was like, I might as well not leave the house. But then eventually, you kind of like have to
Yeah, I mean,
get out of
that's
your
just
own head.
a
Yeah.
little bit unhealthy, but I do understand that.
hmm
And I do think that there are certain things about these franchises that really just like got you. It's the psychological, it's to me, it's like the supernatural.
hmm
I believe in the devil, people, and I don't want to test the theory. Like these movies freaked out of me. So The Conjuring, Insidious, but stuff like that got me. Speaking of Five Nights at Freddy's, it is none of those. And the words that I used to describe this movie to Dan were half baked. This movie was half baked. I feel like if they had a different lead actor, that I feel like if the acting in the script wasn't so hokey, the idea is good. It felt like a new, fresh story I haven't heard before. However, some of the storyline that played out, I feel like they could have used that in a sequel. Like I didn't need to know that his brother was also, oh, spoiler alert, his brother was also murdered by the murderer. You could have just let me know that in a different movie, and it probably would have been more shocking than it was in this movie.
There were definitely like the main story elements here. I think okay, so watching the trailer, going back to the trailer just to start, like I got the impression the way they marketed this movie was this is kind of like a Night at the Museum, except it's a horror movie. And then you
Mhm.
kind of, you take it from there. And then, of course, if people who are fans of the video game, they probably got, a few more context clues from the trailer. But watching the movie itself, like you said, I think I love it when filmmakers make bold decisions
Mhm.
and they do something groundbreaking. It's like in screenwriting class, we used to get told, okay, you're writing a screenplay and you're trying to come up with an idea to do maybe like what happens next in your story. And there was like a brainstorming technique. Okay, so write down your ideas. Now throw away the first 10 ideas that you wrote down and start from like the 11th one down. Because
Mhm.
the first 10 ideas are most likely going to be like cliched ideas, things that other people have done, things that came to your mind first because they're easy way outs or common things that maybe you are drawing from your past memory of other stories that you have read or seen. And I think in this movie, they take a very solid premise and they don't take it far enough. And to the point, I watched the movie and then I mean, maybe it's because I'm super sick. Like I kind of forgot like half of the details over the weekend. And then I read up and I'm like, oh yeah, that does happen. And I was asking you a question. I'm like, wait,
I was like, that's
like
a bad sign.
did the animatronics like turn good at the end? And you were like, no, they were sort of like they came to understand. I was like, oh, okay, cool. Like
I
it was
think that was probably the only jump scare factor to this movie. The animatronics are, excuse my language, fucking creepy. They are
yeah.
giving like creepy Chuck E. Cheese murderers, which I guess is a point, but it's giving like definitely 80s outcast animatronics. It freaky.
And I was reading an article that was like kind of I forget which outlet, but they were analyzing how maybe like slasher films like Jason and all those other like characters for like, whether they have a knife or a chainsaw or whatever, a baseball bat, maybe those kind of horror antagonists aren't going to connect with the modern day audiences as well as something like the animatronics. Like because us growing up, I'm sure we have all gone to places like a Chuck E. Cheese's and we can kind of connect to, yeah, we saw one of those. We wouldn't want to be at Chuck E. Cheese at night now because this movie could come to life. Or like for example, Megan, how well that movie did. That those kind of
Seen
I
that.
think as horror filmmakers are probably learning through these and in Smile, for example, another one, like there's I think a change and a shift in the kind of movies, the kind of horror that connects with today's audiences. And I think on that level, Five Nights at Freddy's works really well.
Mhm.
And yeah, I mean, I think the ending here was like the best way I described it was okay. So they came to the ending of the script. They were like, okay, well, we're gonna end this movie, but we don't have. This isn't like a comic book movie. We don't have an endless amount of money to spend. We're allowed to get a little resourceful, and they're sort of like. But the way they wrote it, it was very cliched, like the way the character turns happen, and then left enough of an open door that the antagonist could come back in the sequel. Which,
No.
given that this movie
And
like
was
made enough
like,
money,
why is he
I
like
wouldn't
a
be
weird
surprised.
feed loop? Like he's he's obviously dead, but like his ghost is on a weird feed loop. Why are the ghosts trapped? Why does he get trapped? Because he gets murdered in the suit. Like that was also the creepy. That was the only reveal that was like, oh, that's fucking dark. Dark. Spoiler alert, everybody. He murders the kids and then sticks their bodies in the animatronic suits. That is dark. However, I just felt like they built up this storyline, which again, like I do think parts of the storyline are fresh, new. I haven't heard that before. It's giving like Lovely Bones and like Stranger Things mixed with Chuck E. Cheese. Like,
There was a lot of Stranger Things, like especially the second season where they had so much of the mall and
yeah,
in that show. Like I think that was definitely I felt like the vibes of all the neon and all that. Yeah, yeah, the
yeah.
colors. Yeah, definitely.
And obviously, Stranger Things is brilliant, brilliant. Like
Mm-hmm.
a million loves, kisses. The one of the best shows I've ever seen to date. But this movie, it should have gone so much further, and then they like wrap up the storyline in such a dumb way that I'm just like, I think I was like playing solitaire on my phone the last like 10 minutes of the movie because I was just like, I'm over this already. Like, it just felt like a waste. I don't know. It wasn't a waste. It wasn't a waste. It was kind of a waste of my time. Yeah, I didn't really care for it. And that is why I am so shocked at how well this movie is doing. This movie is doing so well, you guys. There were what, $78 million worth of box office people that chose not
Domestically?
to watch this. Yeah,
Yeah,
not to watch this at home. Y'all went to the
right.
theater. Can somebody explain to me why? What are we missing? What do I do not know? What do I not know about this video game? Do I need to be playing this video game?
Honestly, I mean, I think it's going to depend. So let's see what the second box office weekend does, because if it's a big drop, then like I think the theory that this might have been just the fortune of being released on Halloween weekend, it
Yeah,
might have been a bigger factor than maybe some people were giving it credit for. Or I haven't read a lot of box office analysis. I'm sure they pointed to that as a reason,
yeah,
because certainly when you look at the Rotten Tomatoes score, I think the score was like under 30% for the critics, and it was somewhere close to 90 for audiences. So a
but
lot of
this
people
should
watching it like it, but are they gonna
well
watch it
also
twice? That's the question.
serve as hope, right? Because the horror box office this year specifically has been doing really poorly. But realistically, in the last few years, there haven't been really any big hitter horror movies that
There have
have
been
done
sleeper
well.
hits, because the thing is, even when a horror movie hits, they generally don't get like 800 million or $1 billion.
Yeah,
A horror movie that's made for like 20 or 30 million and that makes 300-400 million is like considered a huge return on investment, because it is like, but like I think recently we've had some like high profile franchises really, like, even if when they got off to a good start, kind of like fall off, like the Nun 2
yeah,
fell off. The Exorcist, for 40 million, I think it was 40 million that they spent making it. Like it had a pretty good debut, but then it's just not been doing very well like in the following weeks. But the breaking point, the break even point is so low, they will still probably make money off of it. They probably won't make the 400 million back that the Universal spent to get the franchise, but a movie like
well,
this with
I
Five
don't
Nights at
think
Freddy's,
the newest Saw movies or the newest Scream movies have even premiered in theaters. They're just going straight to streaming. I
some of
mean,
them are,
horror in
yeah.
the last few years is just like,
It's
so if
been, I mean, I
anything, I
think
feel
it's,
like this shows that there is still room that people still want to see a good scary freaking movie.
yeah.
I need more scary movies. So if any directors, producers are listening to this, I need more from you. I need a horror movie that makes me feel things and not be able to sleep for 3 days. Okay? Heard?
Yeah.
Cool.
It's Yeah, I think the best horror movies are the ones that sort of like attack our primal instincts. Like for example, growing
Mhm.
up, like I watched some X-Files episodes way too young in hindsight. There was an episode where like they go to the Antarctic, I think, and like there's research scientists like had this like some kind of like bug they were researching that got out of hand. And that's why like Mulder and Scully get called in to investigate as part of the FBI and the X-Files. And these bugs would like get under your skin, and you see all of them, like just a visual of that. That episode like still haunts me 20 years later. There was also like other episodes of the X-Files, which even to this day, if I watch the X-Files, I try to skip the Monster of the Week episodes because those were some of the creepier episodes, and I try to stick with the ones where they're like dealing with the aliens and stuff, because I'm like, I can kind of deal with that. Like that's,
You
I can
know
sleep at
what?
night sort of like with that in mind, but not like
Aliens
the creatures under your skin stuff.
got me.
Like,
What was that Mila Jojo? I always
oh,
mispronounce her
Resident
last name.
Evil, Mila Jovovich.
No, no, no. She did a movie about aliens based off of like a real life scenario in which a girl was supposedly kidnapped by aliens in Alaska. I still have nightmares about that movie. That was one of the creepiest movies I've ever seen in my life. And then
Was it
there
the
was real life footage of the woman and everybody like doing live interviews talking about the whole experience. I was like,
It was like a pseudo documentary. Yeah, it was. I think it was called The Fourth Kind. I just looked it up. It was 2009, and it was sort of the title was derived from the expansion of J. Allen Hynek, who was in the 50s, I believe. He actually worked for um, the U.S. Air Force, like Project Blue Book, which they made a TV show out of. Actually, I really love that show. That got canceled a bit too early, but was focused on his work for the U.S. government and the Air Force specifically, looking at like UFO sightings and trying to find explanations for like, what was it actually alien or was it like something else? Even if it was like Russian spy craft or like, this is the Cold War, of course. And so he even like did some interviews and like about close encounters with aliens and so I think The Fourth Kind was sort of like taking that an extent, like taking an extension of his work and adapting it for that movie. And it was made by one of the director, like is a big executive producer on like today's Star Trek shows on Paramount. So yeah, like you said, it's like these the horror movies they connect for various people for various reasons. Maybe it's just your personal experience, your set of beliefs. Five Nights at Freddy's, it looks like it wouldn't be the movie that I would have picked if you looked at all the movies, The Exorcist 2, The Nun, like the new Saw movie, even like A Haunting in Venice or like all Disney's Haunted Mansion. Of all the movies, the horror movies that you would classify in that genre that came out and are coming out this year, you would not have pegged Five Nights at Freddy's to be the one that had the biggest opening. And certainly not the biggest opening for Blumhouse. I mean, like, okay, like that's not who thought of all the franchises that they're known for that Five Nights at Freddy's would be the one to like take that record. But here we are, guys. Let us know in the comments below what you thought about the movie. Is this something that blew you away? That was like, you were one of the people who went on Rotten Tomatoes and gave it like the really high audience score, or were you somebody who was underwhelmed by it? Like I know I was a little underwhelmed, but I have a very high bar. So like I think for me, the movie was probably like maybe a C plus at best, but I think for a lot of horror fans, it might have been a much higher rating. So also like let us know, what do you think about the idea of maybe a possible sequel? They do leave the door open just a little bit. Even in animatronic form, maybe the antagonist from this movie can return for the next one in a sequel. And if this movie continues to make money, you can bet they will try to make a sequel out of it. Whether that comes out in theaters or day and date or just straight to Peacock, we will find out. But let us know in the comments what you think. Like and subscribe for more content like this. We review movies every week here on Also Curious. So we'll be back, next week with another movie review, and you can check back here for that when it comes out.